5 soldiers, 1 unarmed man, 3 seconds. That's all it took. When they stripped Staff Sergeant Cole Macready of his rifle right there on the tarmac at Fort Carson in front of every soldier on the base, they thought they were breaking him. They thought a single dad with a bad shoulder, a teenage son at home, and a career hanging by a thread was finished. They were wrong. Why? What they didn't know was that Cole Macready had already buried one war inside him. And the moment that rifle left his hands, something far more dangerous woke up. If you're watching this from your city right now, drop it in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit subscribe. This is only the beginning. The rifle hit the table with a sound like a judge's gavel. Not his fault. That was the first thing Cole Macready said to himself when he walked into that room. Not my fault. He had learned long ago that in the Army, the first man to believe his own guilt was the first man to lose. But the way Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Calloway was looking at him, slow, deliberate, the way a man looks at something he already owns, Cole felt that belief start to crack at the edges. You want to tell me why there are 14 M4s unaccounted for in your warehouse log, Sergeant? Calloway said. His voice was quiet. That was the thing about Calloway. He didn't raise it. Men who raised their voices were unsure of themselves. Calloway had never been unsure of anything in his life. 14 rifles. Gone. And your signature is on every single transfer form. Cole kept his back straight. His shoulder ached. It always ached, the old rotator cuff tear from Kandahar that the Army said was 40% disability, and he said was just Tuesday, but he didn't let it show. Sir, those forms were filled out correctly. Every transfer was documented. I signed off on what I was told to sign off on. By who? By Sergeant First Class Draven, sir. He gave me the paperwork. I logged it. Calloway leaned back in his chair. He had that look the one career officers develop after 20 years of sitting across from enlisted men, the look that said, I've heard this before, and it means nothing. Draven says he never gave you any paperwork. The room felt smaller. Cole had been in this office before. Not this specific room, but this specific moment. The moment where the Army decides which version of the truth it prefers. He'd seen it in Iraq. He'd seen it after Kandahar. He'd seen good men get ground up in the machinery of institutional protection and come out the other side as cautionary tales. He'd promised himself after his wife left and he was raising Tyler alone that he would never be one of those men. Then Draven is lying, sir. Calloway smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. That's a serious accusation, Sergeant. Yes, sir, it is. You have kids, don't you, Macready? The question landed wrong. Cole felt it in his chest before his brain processed it, that particular displacement of air that happens when someone drops a grenade in a conversation. One son, Tyler, 17. Calloway picked up a pen and turned it between his fingers. Hell of an age. Lot of decisions ahead of him. College, future, the kind of future that's a lot easier when his father has a clean record. He set the pen down. Think about that. Cole looked at the man for a long moment. He thought about Tyler up at 6 every morning, scrambled eggs and orange juice backpack by the door. That quiet way, he said, "See you tonight, Dad." Like it was the most important thing he said all day. He thought about the Ranger tab on his shoulder that had cost him more than he could put into words. He thought about 14 rifles and a stack of forged transfer forms and a man sitting across from him who was betting everything on Cole's fear being bigger than his conscience. I'm not going to lie, sir, Cole said. Not for Draven, not for anyone. Calloway's smile didn't waver. Dismissed, Sergeant. Cole had been at Fort Carson for 2 years. He'd arrived after a 30-month rotation overseas that had left him quieter than he used to be and quicker to notice exits when he walked into a room. The assignment was supposed to be straightforward logistics management warehouse oversight, the kind of duty that let a man get home before his kid's dinner got cold. After 12 years of forward deployment, Cole had earned quiet. He'd earned boring. What he hadn't counted on was Private First Class Brennan Mackey. Mackey was 22. Alabama-born, the kind of young that still believed the Army meant what it said in the brochures. He had a habit of logging things too carefully, the kind of careful that came from a mother who kept receipts for everything, and a father who said, "Son, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen." When Mackey noticed the first discrepancy, he thought it was a clerical error. When he noticed the third, he brought it to Cole. "Sergeant Macready?" Mackey had knocked on the frame of Cole's office door, not the glass, the frame the way you knock when you're not sure you should be there. "You got a minute?" "I got about 4, Cole said. He was eating a sandwich at his desk. Lunch was 12 minutes because that was when Tyler usually texted. "What do you need, Mackey?" The private came in and closed the door behind him. That was the first thing that made Cole set the sandwich down. Mackey put a folder on the desk. "I've been cross-referencing the outgoing inventory logs with the receiving confirmations from the armory. The numbers don't match. At first I thought I was doing it wrong, so I ran it 3 times. The transfers are signed for, but there's no corresponding confirmation on the receiving end. The rifles left the warehouse, but they didn't arrive anywhere on record." Cole opened the folder. He looked at the numbers. He'd seen enough logistics in 12 years to know what he was looking at. You learned to read inventory sheets the way some people read faces. You learned where the lies lived, in the gaps in the rounded numbers in the signatures that appeared just a little too consistently in the same handwriting. "How many?" 14 M4 so far, but I think it goes back further. If I had access to the Q3 logs from last fiscal year..." "Stop!" Cole closed the folder. "Who else have you shown this to?" Mackey hesitated. "No one, Sergeant. You're the first." "Good." Cole kept his voice level. He was already feeling something he didn't want to feel, that old familiar tightening in the chest that happened when a situation started moving faster than the people in it. "You didn't print these from a shared terminal?" "No, sir. My personal workstation. Private login." "All right." Cole tapped the folder. "Leave this with me. Don't make any more copies. Don't talk to anyone about this. Not Draven, not your bunkmates, not anyone. You understand?" "Yes, Sergeant." "And Mackey." The private stopped at the door. Cole looked at him. The young face, the eager honesty of it, the complete absence of the kind of calculus that would tell him to look away and mind his own business. "You did the right thing bringing this to me. That took guts." Mackey nodded. He almost looked proud. "My daddy always said you see something wrong, you say something." After he left, Cole sat for a long time looking at the folder. His sandwich went cold. He ran the numbers himself that night. Tyler was at a friend's house pre-calculus study group, or so he said, and Cole had learned to trust the pre-calculus alibi because Tyler's grades backed it up. The house was quiet, in the way houses get quiet when you've been raising a kid alone for 4 years. The particular silence that sits in rooms between the hours of 8 and 11, before you hear the key in the lock and the weight you've been carrying all day drops off your shoulders. Cole spread Mackey's documents across the kitchen table and cross-referenced them with his own mental inventory of the last 6 months. He was methodical about it. That was how his father had taught him to do things. Slow down. Son, slow down and think. And it was a lesson that had kept him alive in more than one situation where speed would have gotten him killed. By 10 o'clock he had what he needed. Not just 14 rifles, 41. 41 weapons over 8 months. The transfers were routed through a logistics chain that created just enough administrative distance to make each individual transaction look routine. Whoever had set this up knew exactly how the Army's inventory oversight worked, knew where the blind spots were, knew which approval levels required counter-signature and which could be moved with a single authorizing signature. That required rank. That required access. That required someone who'd been inside the system long enough to know where it breathed. Cole thought about the way Calloway had said, "Think about that. The casual confidence of it. The way a man speaks when he's not used to being told no." He picked up his phone and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in 8 months. Garrison Whitlock, retired gunnery sergeant, now living outside Tucson. They'd served together in the second rotation through Fallujah. Garrison was the kind of man who, when things went sideways, you wanted on your six, not because he was the biggest or the fastest, but because he had a stillness to him that steadied everything around him. The phone rang 4 times. "Cole Macready!" Garrison's voice was low and unhurried, the voice of a man who'd been awake for a while. "What time is it?" "Late. I need your help with something." A pause. "How bad?" "I don't know yet. That's the problem." "All right," Garrison said. "Talk to me." Cole didn't sleep that night. He ran 3 miles at 5 in the morning, the way he always did. Steady pace, bad shoulder, rolled back, head down, and by the time he came back inside and made coffee, Tyler was already at the table in his socks eating cereal and looking at his phone. "You went running again," Tyler said. Not a question. "I run every morning, Ty. You run every morning when something's bothering you." Tyler didn't look up from his phone, but Cole knew the look, the sidelong awareness his son had developed over years of reading his father's silences. "Mom used to say you ran away from your problems instead of talking about them." "Mom ran away to Phoenix," Cole said, and immediately regretted it. He set his mug down. "Sorry, that wasn't—" "It's fine." Tyler did look up then. He had Cole's eyes, that particular shade of gray-green that looked different in every light, and his mother's mouth, the stubborn set of it. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Eat your cereal." "Dad." Cole looked at his son. 17 years old, and already he had that way of looking at you that made deflection impossible. Cole had read somewhere that teenagers were supposed to stop paying attention to their parents, and he had been waiting for years for that phase to begin. It hadn't. "There's some stuff at work I'm sorting out," Cole said. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Is it serious?" "I don't know yet." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "Are you in trouble?" "No." The word came out faster than Cole intended. He softened it. "No, buddy. I'm not in trouble. I found something I shouldn't have found, and now I have to figure out what to do with it. That's all." Tyler looked at him for another long moment. Then he nodded slowly, the way he nodded when he was accepting something he wasn't entirely convinced of. "Okay." He went back to his cereal. "Just you'd tell me right if it was bad." Cole put a hand on his son's shoulder. Felt the weight of him, the realness of it, the grounding quality of a 17-year-old boy who still let his father touch his shoulder without flinching away. "Yeah, Ty, I'd tell you." He wasn't sure that was true, but he knew it was the right thing to say. The beating happened on a Tuesday. Cole had been tracking the paper trail for 11 days. He'd been careful, no digital footprints, nothing on base systems, everything handwritten and kept in a water-resistant field notebook that he stored behind a loose panel in his truck. Garrison was working a parallel track from Tucson, using contacts he still had from his time in criminal investigations before retirement. Things were moving. Then Mackie stopped showing up to PT. Cole noticed it on Wednesday morning, the empty space in the formation where Mackie usually stood. 3rd row, 2nd from the left, always slightly too eager in his posture. He asked around. Nobody had seen him since Monday night. The official word was a medical absence. Cole drove to the barracks on his lunch break. He knocked on Mackie's door. "Oui?" What opened it wasn't the young private he'd seen 11 days ago. It was something that used to be him, eyes swollen to slits, lower lip split open and scabbed. The careful way he held his ribs when he breathed that told Cole at least 2 of them were cracked. "Who did this?" Cole kept his voice flat. Mackie shook his head. "Fell in the gym." Mackie. "Fell in the gym, Sergeant." His one open eye held something that Cole recognized from his own mirror years ago, the look of a man who's been shown exactly what happens to people who speak up. "I appreciate you stopping by." "Look at me." Cole waited until the kid's eye came up to meet his. "I need you to hear me right now." I know what happened. I know who sent them, and I am not walking away from this. Sergeant, please. You did the right thing. You hear me? What you did was right, and I'm not going to let them make you pay for it alone. Cole leaned in slightly, kept his voice low. But I need you to hold on. Can you do that? Mackey's jaw tightened. Under the damage. Under the fear, Cole could see the thing that had made him knock on his office door in the first place. The bedrock stubbornness of a kid raised to say something when he saw something wrong. Yes, Sergeant, Mackey said quietly. I can hold on. Cole called Calloway's office and requested a meeting. The adjutant told him the colonel was unavailable. Cole said he'd wait. The adjutant told him it would be a long wait. Cole said that was fine. He sat in the hallway outside the administrative suite for 2 hours and 40 minutes. People walked past him. Some of them looked at him. Nobody said anything. There was something about a man sitting perfectly still with his hands on his knees and his back straight that if you'd been in the military long enough, you recognized as a particular kind of declaration. At 4:17, the adjutant told him the colonel would see him. Calloway was standing when Cole walked in, not sitting behind his desk, but standing at the window, hands clasped behind his back looking out at the base as though he'd rehearsed this. Maybe he had. Sergeant Macready, he said without turning. I understand you've been quite persistent today. I need to talk to you about Private Mackey, sir. Mackey. Calloway said the name the way you'd say the name of something small and inconsequential. He reported a gym injury, tragic. These young soldiers, they push themselves too hard sometimes. He was beaten, sir, by Draven and Yates, on your order. Now Calloway turned. The expression on his face wasn't anger. It was something closer to pity. The expression of a man who considers pity more demeaning than contempt. That is an extraordinary accusation, Sergeant. Do you have any evidence to support it? Not yet. Then I'd strongly advise you to be very careful with your words. Calloway moved to his desk, sat down, picked up a pen with the precise deliberateness of a man reclaiming his space. I've been reviewing your file, Macready. Good soldier, decorated, Ranger qualified, but there are some noted incidents insubordination at Bagram in 2019. A complaint filed by Captain Reyes in 2021 that was ultimately dismissed. A pattern of, he tilted his head slightly, difficulty with authority. With corrupt authority, sir. Calloway looked at him for a long moment. You have a son. Tyler Wright, 17. There it was again. Cole felt his hands tighten against his thighs and forced them to relax. He'd been waiting for it, the second invocation of Tyler, the confirmation that Calloway had done his research, that this was deliberate and calculated and meant to land. Yes, sir, Cole said. Yes, sir, Cole. Ranger Tab, Purple Heart, 2 combat deployments. Calloway folded his hands on the desk. You've given a lot to this uniform, Sergeant. Be ashamed to end a career like yours with a dishonorable. Leave your son with that. Be a shame. The room was very quiet. Cole looked at the man across the desk, at the silver on his collar, at the ribbons on his chest, at the careful architecture of authority that Calloway had built around himself over 20 years, and he thought about what it meant. What it had meant to him once. What it was supposed to mean. Then he thought about Mackey's swollen eye, about 41 rifles, about a private from Alabama whose father taught him to say something when he saw something wrong, and who was now sitting in a barracks room with cracked ribs because he'd believed that. I appreciate your concern for my son, sir, Cole said. His voice was level. Is there anything else? Calloway studied him. Something shifted in his expression, not much, but enough. The calculation of a man reassessing the weight of what he's dealing with. Dismissed, Sergeant. Cornell walked out of the office, down the hallway, out the front doors, into the late afternoon air. He stood on the steps and let the Colorado wind hit him in the face. Then he took out his phone and called Garrison. It's Calloway, he said. All of it. He's been running it for at least 8 months. Draven and Yates are his muscle. Mackey just got a visit from both of them. Kid okay? He'll live. Garrison was quiet for a moment. How do you want to play it? Cole looked out across the base at the flat geometry of it, the flagpole, the parade ground, the rows of buildings that had represented order and purpose for the better part of his adult life. He thought about the moment he'd walked into Calloway's office, and the moment he'd walked out, and the distance between those two moments felt like the distance between two different versions of himself. We go over his head, Cole said. We take what we have to CID directly. We document everything, and we protect Mackie. And if Calloway moves on you first. Cole was quiet for a moment. The wind picked up. Then we deal with that too. He made Tyler's favorite dinner that night, chicken marsala from scratch, the recipe his own father had made every Sunday when Cole was growing up. Tyler ate 2 plates without being asked, and then sat across the table looking at his father with that 17-year-old directness that Cole had never quite gotten used to. You seem better, Tyler said. Yeah, like... Tyler searched for the word. Decided. You seem decided. Cole looked at his son across the table. This boy, he'd made this person who had his eyes and his stubborn streak and his mother's laugh and 4 years of growing up in the particular household of a single father who ran every morning and kept his promises, and something settled in his chest. Not peace exactly, something more functional than peace. Clarity. I am, Cole said. Yeah, I think I am. Tyler nodded like that made complete sense. He reached for the serving dish. Is there more mushroom sauce? Cole slid it across the table. There's always more mushroom sauce. Outside, the Colorado night was cold and clear and full of stars. Inside, a single dad finished dinner with his son and quietly prepared for the fight of his life. He didn't know, not yet, what the next 48 hours would cost him. He didn't know what Calloway had already set in motion or what Draven and Yates were willing to do to make a problem disappear. He didn't know that the night his rifle was taken from him on the tarmac in front of every soldier on that base was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of it. The morning after Cole made his decision, Calloway made his. Cole found out about it the way you find out about most things on a military base. Not from the people who owe you information, but from the people who feel guilty keeping it. Specialist Haley Doss worked in the administrative office 2 buildings down from the armory. She was 26, sharp-eyed, and had been quietly in love with Brennan Mackie since the battalion cookout in August. She caught Cole in the parking lot at 06:30 walking fast with her head down, and said his name like she was running out of time to say it. Sergeant Macready. She looked over her shoulder. I need 30 seconds. You've got them. There's a formal inquiry being opened against you. Misappropriation of government property. Calloway signed the referral last night. It goes to the JAG office this morning. She pressed a folded piece of paper into his hand. That's everything I heard. I could lose my position for telling you this. You won't, Cole said. I promise you that. She walked away without looking back. Cole stood in the parking lot and opened the paper. It was a handwritten list, names, dates, the shape of what was coming. His name on a referral. Draven listed as a corroborating witness. 2 other signatures Cole recognized from inventory review boards going back to the previous fiscal year. Calloway hadn't just moved fast. He'd moved prepared. This had been ready to go before Cole ever sat down across from him in that office. The meeting had been theater. Calloway was never negotiating. He was buying time. Cole folded the paper and put it in his breast pocket. Then he took out his phone and called Garrison. He filed on me, Cole said. How fast? Last night. Jag gets it this morning. Garrison let out a low breath that wasn't quite a curse. Okay, that changes the timetable. What do you have in your truck right now? The notebook. Everything I've cross-referenced for the last 11 days. Is it enough? Cole thought about it. Honestly, seriously thought about it the way he thought about terrain before moving through it. Probably 60% of what we need. The Q3 logs would close it. Without those, it's circumstantial on the major counts. Where are the Q3 logs? Digital, base system, archived under supply records from October through December. Can Mackie access them? Not from his barracks. He'd need terminal access, which means he'd need to physically be at a workstation in the supply building. Cole paused. Which means Draven would know within 10 minutes. Then we need someone else to pull them. Garrison's voice was even deliberate, the voice of a man thinking 3 moves ahead while he talked. You trust Doss? I think so. You need to know so. Yeah, Cole said. Give me an hour. He found Doss at her workstation at 07:15. He didn't sit down. He stood in the doorway and waited until she looked up. And when she did, he kept his voice low and specific. I need the Q3 supply archive logs. October, November, December. Outgoing transfers, armory receiving confirmations. I need them printed, and I need them today. Doss looked at him for a long moment. That's a restricted archive. I know. If someone checks the access log, I know that too. Cole met her eyes. I'm not going to pretend this is low-risk specialist. It isn't. I'm going to tell you exactly what I told Mackie. You don't have to do this. What's happening here is not your responsibility. You can say no, and I walk out of here and that's the end of it. Doss looked down at her keyboard. Her jaw was tight. Brennan told me what you said to him, that you weren't going to let him pay for it alone. She looked up. Is that still true? Even now that they've filed on you? Yes. She held his gaze for another second, then she turned to her screen. Give me 45 minutes. Cole spent those 45 minutes at his own desk writing. Not on his computer on paper, in the same small, precise handwriting his father had taught him, because handwriting is harder to intercept and easier to authenticate. He wrote everything he knew in the order he knew it. The discrepancies Mackie had found, the conversation with Calloway, the names of the witnesses, the timeline. He wrote it as a sworn statement not for JAG, not yet, but for himself, because there was something about committing the facts to paper that made them harder for the part of you that was afraid to revise. When he was done, he put it with the notebook. Then he went to pick up the logs. Doss handed them to him in a manila folder with a blank cover. She didn't say anything. He nodded once, and she went back to her screen, and that was the whole conversation. And Cole thought that was one of the bravest things he'd seen on a military base in a long time. He called Garrison from his truck. I've got the Q3 logs. And? Cole had looked at them on the way out of the building, standing in the hallway with his back to the wall and the folder open at his waist. It goes back further than 8 months, at least 14 months. The number isn't 41 rifles, Garrison. It's closer to 100. And there are vehicle parts in here too. Engine components, high-value maintenance equipment. He paused. This isn't supplemental income. This is an operation. Someone is supplying an external buyer, systematically. The silence on the other end of the phone had weight to it. Cole, Garrison said quietly. That's federal. I know. That's not just career ending. That's prison time. For Calloway, for Draven, for everyone in the chain. Another pause. Which means they are not going to let this get out. At all. You understand what I'm saying to you. Cole understood. He understood the way you understand something not in your mind, but in your body. That specific alertness that combat veterans spend the rest of their civilian lives learning to turn off. The sense that the environment around you has changed. That the threat level has shifted. I need to get Tyler out of the house. Yes, Garrison said. Do that first, right now, before anything else, or... Cole called Tyler's phone. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. He called again. Same result. He sent a text. Call me when you see this. Important. He stared at the screen for a moment, then typed, I love you, kid. Then he put the truck in drive and headed home. Tyler was in the kitchen when Cole got their earbuds in making a sandwich, completely unaware that his father had just covered the 15-minute drive in 9. Cole came through the door, and Tyler looked up, and something in his expression shifted immediately. That 17-year-old antenna that had been tuned to his father's frequency since he was old enough to notice the difference between his father's normal footstep and his worried one. "Dad, what happened? I need you to pack a bag." Cole was already moving through the house, checking the windows out of a reflex he hadn't used in years. "Clothes for a week, your laptop, your charger, your backup drive with your school stuff. Dad, Tyler." Cole stopped and turned and looked at his son directly the way he'd always promised himself he would if this moment ever came. Not around him, not through him, straight at him. "I told you last night that I'd tell you if it was bad. It's bad. Not dangerous, I don't think, but I need you somewhere safe while I work through something, and I need to know you're there so I can think clearly. Can you do that for me?" Tyler held his gaze for a moment that felt longer than it was. He was his father's son. Cole could see him running the calculation, weighing it, deciding. "Where am I going?" "Uncle Garrison's, Tucson. I'll call him while you pack." "Garrison's in Arizona. That's why I want you there." Tyler pulled out his earbuds, looked at his sandwich. Then he turned and walked toward the hallway. "Give me 10 minutes. He was ready in 8. Cole drove him to the bus station because flying would create a record, and Garrison's truck would create a conversation they didn't have time for. He bought the ticket in cash. While they waited, Tyler sat beside him with his backpack between his feet and didn't ask any more questions, which was a kind of love Cole didn't have words for. When the bus was called, Tyler stood up and shouldered his bag. He was almost Cole's height, now had been for about a year, and there were moments like this one where Cole looked at him and could see the man he was going to be. The solidity of it. The steadiness. "Hey," Cole said. Tyler turned. "I'm going to fix this." Tyler looked at him for a moment. "I know," he said. "You always do." He paused. "Just don't get shot or whatever." "I'll do my best." "Dad, I'll do my best, buddy. Go." Tyler went. Cole watched the bus until it turned the corner and was gone. Then he stood on the sidewalk with his hands in his jacket pockets and let himself have 30 seconds of feeling it, the weight of it, the specific grief of watching your kid walk toward safety because the alternative is keeping him in the blast radius. 30 seconds. Then he put it away and walked back to the truck. He had work to do. Garrison had a contact at the Army Criminal Investigation Division, a warrant officer named Patricia Lund, who'd worked financial crimes for 11 years before transferring to the Fort Bragg field office. Garrison had served with her husband in Fallujah, which was the kind of connection that still counted for something when everything else was compromised. He reached out through a personal channel not official, and she called Cole's cell at 2 in the afternoon. "Garrison says you have documentation," she said. No preamble, no pleasantries. The voice of someone who'd been in the job long enough to know that pleasantries cost time. How solid? Solid enough that someone filed a preemptive obstruction charge against me this morning to slow it down. A pause. Who filed? Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Calloway, Fort Carson. Another pause longer. Calloway. I've heard that name in a context I didn't follow up on. Her voice was careful now, the carefulness of someone reorganizing what they know. What's the scope? Approximately 100 weapons over 14 months. Vehicle parts. High-value maintenance equipment. The transfer documentation creates a paper chain that makes each transaction look routine, but the receiving confirmations don't exist on the back end. Someone is moving this material to an external buyer. The forged transfers are signed by a Sergeant First Class Draven and co-signed by a specialist named Yates. And your involvement. My signature appears on a subset of the transfer forms. I signed off on paperwork presented to me by Draven as routine transfers. I did not know the transfers were fraudulent at the time. Can you prove that? I can prove the signature dates are inconsistent with my duty schedule on 3 of the 14 forms. I was on leave when 2 of them were supposedly processed. I have my leave authorization documents. But the line was quiet for a moment. Cole could hear her thinking the particular quality of silence that belongs to someone doing math. I'm going to need to see everything, she said finally. Physical copies, chain of custody documentation, everything. And I'm going to need you to not do anything that gives Calloway additional grounds to move against you in the meantime. Can you do that? I can try, Cole said. That's not good enough, Sergeant. No. Cole agreed. It isn't, but it's honest. Another pause. Then, and this was the moment Cole exhaled, Lund said, I can be at Fort Carson in 48 hours. Unofficial capacity until I've reviewed the material. If it's what you're describing, I escalate to full investigation and we do this right. She paused. Garrison vouches for you. I'll try to deserve that. See that you do. She hung up. Cole sat in his truck for a moment. Then he drove back to the base. He was crossing the parking lot toward the logistics building when Draven stepped out from between 2 vehicles. Cole had known Draven by reputation before he knew him by face. First Sergeant material people said solid performer, loyal to his CO, the kind of sergeant who understood that being useful to the right people was its own form of advancement. He was built for intimidation, 6'2", 240, the wide-shouldered permanence of a man who'd spent 15 years making other men step aside. He had a way of moving that used more space than necessary, that claimed ground without appearing to claim it. Then, he fell into step beside Cole without invitation. You've been busy, Draven said, conversational, almost friendly. Making phone calls, running around, taking meetings. He glanced over. Specialist DOS pulled an archive log this morning, restricted files. The access log flagged it automatically. Cole kept walking. Good morning, Sergeant First Class. You're going to want to stop what you're doing, Macready. I'm walking to my office. You know what I mean. Draven stopped walking, which forced Cole to choose between stopping and leaving his back exposed. Cole stopped. He turned around. Draven was looking at him with an expression that wasn't quite a threat, and wasn't quite an offer, the expression of a man presenting terms. What happened to Mackie was a message. You're smart enough to read messages. I'm also smart enough, Cole said, to know that you just told me you have access to restricted access logs, which means you either have admin privileges you're not authorized for, or someone in the administrative office is feeding you information. Either way, that's a problem for you, not for me. Draven's expression shifted slightly. The calculation behind his eyes, Cole could see it happening, the reassessment. You're making this harder than it needs to be. You beat a 22-year-old private half to death for logging inventory correctly, Cole said. His voice was even. I'm not interested in easy. Draven took a slow step forward. They were close enough now that Cole could see the particular flatness in his eyes. Not anger, something cooler than anger, the professional assessment of a man determining whether a situation requires escalation. You've got a kid, Draven said quietly. Cole felt it go through him, the same way it went through him when Calloway said it, the same precise placement of the words, the same calculation that Tyler was the lever that would move him. He felt it. He noted it. He filed it. Yeah, Cole said. I do. He's with friends. He held Draven's gaze. Anything else? Draven looked at him for a long moment. Then he stepped back, slowly. The way men step back when they're not retreating, but registering. You're going to regret this, he said. Maybe, Cole said, but not as much as you are. He turned and walked into the building. Inside, he went directly to the men's bathroom, ran cold water over his wrists, and looked at himself in the mirror. His shoulder ached. His jaw was tight. His hands were steady. That was the thing about being a ranger, about 12 years of forward deployment, about being the kind of man who'd stood between incoming fire and 47 other men in Kandahar and made decisions in the space between heartbeats. His hands didn't shake. They never shook. Sometimes that felt like a gift. Sometimes it felt like the loneliest thing about him. He dried his hands, went to his office, sat down, started writing the supplemental documentation that Lund would need clear-dated, sourced the kind of evidentiary record that could withstand a defense attorney's best afternoon. His phone buzzed at 4:30. A text from an unknown number, 2 words. Smart man. Cole stared at it. Then he screenshot it, dated it, and added it to the file. He worked until 7. Then he drove home to a quiet house, made himself dinner alone at the kitchen table for the first time in 4 years, and sat for a long time looking at the chair where Tyler usually sat. He thought about 41 rifles. He thought about 100. He thought about Mackie's cracked ribs and Doss's hands shaking slightly as she pressed a manila folder into his, and the way Patricia Lund had said, "Garrison vouches for you," like that meant something. He thought about Tyler on a bus heading south, saying you always do, trusting him, the way kids trust their parents before they learn enough about the world to stop. He thought about Raymond Calloway sitting somewhere in officers' quarters with a signed referral and 20 years of impunity, and the absolute confidence of a man who had never once been told no by someone he couldn't outrank. Cole washed his dish, turned off the kitchen light, sat on the edge of his bed in the dark. 48 hours until Lund arrived. 48 hours to hold his position, protect the documentation, keep Mackie and Doss clear of whatever Calloway was planning to do next. He set his alarm for 5, closed his eyes. Somewhere between the last thought and sleep, he heard his father's voice, the old man 20 years gone, standing in the kitchen with a dish towel over his shoulder. "Slow down, son. Slow down and think." He'd slowed down. He'd thought. Now came the part that always came after thinking. Now came the hard part. The alarm went off at 5 and Cole was already awake. He'd slept maybe 3 hours. Not from anxiety, or not just from anxiety, but from the particular hypervigilance that kicks in when a man's brain understands on some level below language that the situation around him has entered a new phase. He'd lain in the dark and run through scenarios the way he used to run through breach plans, entry points, contingencies. What happens if this goes wrong? What happens if that goes wrong? Where are the people I can't afford to lose? He'd done it until the ceiling stopped being a ceiling and became a planning surface, and then he'd given up on sleep entirely and made coffee at 4:30 and sat at the kitchen table with the documentation spread in front of him, going through it one more time. Everything was in order. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Garrison called at 5:15. "You sleep." "Some." "Tyler got here safe. Kid ate half my refrigerator and fell asleep on the couch watching baseball. He's fine." Something in Cole's chest unknotted by a fraction. "Thank you." "He asked me about Fallujah," Garrison said. "Wanted to know what kind of soldier you were." "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were the most stubborn man I'd ever served with, and that I meant that as a compliment." A pause. He said he already knew. Cole almost smiled. Almost. Lund confirmed 48 hours. She'll be here tomorrow afternoon. "Then you need to stay invisible today. Don't give Calloway anything to work with. No confrontations, no unauthorized access, nothing that looks like you're escalating. Just breathe and hold the line." "I know." "Cole?" Garrison's voice shifted into the register it went to when he was being serious in a way that required you to stop and actually listen. "I mean it. I know what you're like when something gets your blood up. I've seen you walk into things you shouldn't have walked into because you decided the math was worth it. Today the math is not worth it. Today you protect the case." "I hear you." "Good. Keep hearing me." Cole drove to the base at 6:30. The morning was cold, the kind of cold that gets into Colorado in mid-November and decides to stay. He went to his office, signed in, and began the most disciplined performance of normalcy he'd attempted since a 12-hour op in Kandahar that required him to sit in a chai house for 6 hours pretending to be bored. He processed inventory reports. He answered 3 administrative emails. He reviewed a requisition form for vehicle maintenance equipment and signed it and sent it back. At 9 o'clock, he had a scheduled logistics meeting with 3 other NCOs that lasted 40 minutes and concerned absolutely nothing related to anything he was currently involved in. And he sat through it and contributed appropriately and did not look at his phone once. At 10:15, his phone rang. Unknown number different from the one that had sent the 2-word text the night before. He answered it. Sergeant Macready. The voice was unfamiliar, male calm, pitched low. You don't know me. My name is Petrov. I work in vehicle maintenance on the south side of the base. Cole said nothing. He waited. I heard you're looking into supply discrepancies. I've been looking at some of the same things from a different direction. A pause. I can give you documentation on the vehicle components. Engine parts, hydraulic systems. I've been logging them quietly for 4 months because I didn't know who I could trust. Some of it has serial numbers that can be traced to specific original purchase orders. Another pause. I'm told you might be someone I can trust. Who told you that? Doss. Cole leaned back in his chair. The room was quiet. Where are you right now? South Maintenance Yard, Bay 7. Can you meet me in an hour? I'll be here. Cole sat for a moment after the call ended. His instinct said genuine. The voice had the specific quality of controlled fear of someone who'd been sitting on something too long and was finally releasing the pressure. His training said verify. He called Doss. Petrov, he said when she picked up. Did you send him to me? Yes, she said quietly. I'm sorry, I should have told you first. He came to me 2 weeks ago. He's been documenting component thefts from maintenance for months. I told him you might be building something bigger and that it would be worth talking to you. You trust him. As much as I've trusted anyone in the last 3 weeks, she said. Which I know is not a ringing endorsement, but yes, I think he's real. Cole thanked her and hung up. Then he picked up the documentation from his desk, the physical copies of everything he'd compiled, and locked them in the metal box in the back of his truck that he'd been using as a field safe since he was deployed. He drove to the South Maintenance Yard. Petrov was 28 slight, with the careful posture of someone who'd spent years trying not to take up too much space in rooms. He had grease on his forearms and a manila envelope that he held against his chest like it was the most valuable thing on the base. Show me, Cole said. Petrov opened the envelope. Inside were 12 pages of handwritten logs, serial numbers, part descriptions, dates, the names of the NCOs who had authorized the removals. 4 months of documentation kept on paper because, as Petrov put it, I didn't trust the base systems after I figured out who had admin access. Cole went through every page, slowly, carefully. When he was finished, he looked up. You've been carrying this for 4 months alone. I didn't know what else to do, Petrov said. I thought about going to my CO, but my CO is in Calloway's unit. I thought about JAG, but I've seen what happens to people who file before they have ironclad documentation. I didn't have enough alone. You do now, Cole said. Together, this does it. And Petrov's face did something complicated, relief and fear arriving at the same time, the expression of a man who'd wanted someone to say that for months and was now uncertain what it meant that someone finally had. What happens next? An investigator from CID arrives tomorrow afternoon. You'll need to be available to speak with her and provide a sworn statement. Can you do that? Yes. He said it without hesitating, which told Cole everything he needed to know about how long the man had been waiting to say it. Keep the originals somewhere off base. Do you have somewhere safe? My brother's house, 20 minutes out. And take them there today. Don't make copies on base systems. Don't tell anyone else what you're doing. Cole met his eyes. And if anyone approaches you about the maintenance logs before tomorrow, you call me directly. Not your CO, not your unit chain. Me. Petrov nodded. Cole gave him his cell number and watched him walk back into the maintenance bay, and then he sat in his truck for a moment, feeling the particular weight of a case that had just gotten significantly more solid. It was the weight of things actually working, He wasn't used to it. He drove back toward the logistics building. He was 50 yards from the main entrance when he saw Yates. Specialist Marcus Yates was standing at the base of the steps with two other soldiers Cole didn't recognize, both of them, big both, positioned with the casual deliberateness that meant they'd been told where to stand. Yates was the one who'd hit Mackey in the ribs. Cole knew this not from evidence, but from the way Mackey had flinched when Yates's name came up in conversation, the specific animal recognition of a man identifying the source of his pain. Yates held up a hand. "Sergeant Macready, Colonel Calloway wants to see you." "I have a meeting. It's been rescheduled." Yates smiled the smile of a man who knows the ground is tilted in his favor. "Sir wants to see you now. Over at the armory." "What? The armory. Not the administrative suite, not Calloway's office, the armory. Cole processed that. The armory was isolated on the east side of the base. It was not a place where conversations happened publicly. It was a place where a certain kind of conversation could happen privately, with controlled access and limited foot traffic, and very little in the way of witnesses. He thought about what Garrison had said that morning. "Today, you protect the case." "Lead the way," Cole said. The walk to the armory took 4 minutes. Yates walked in front, the two unfamiliar soldiers behind the formation, loose enough to look casual and tight enough to communicate exactly what it was. Cole kept his breathing even, and his hands relaxed at his sides and cataloged everything, the spacing between the men, the way Yates carried himself. The fact that neither of the two soldiers behind him wore rank insignia he could immediately identify. Calloway was waiting inside the armory entrance. He was in full uniform ribbons and all, which was a choice, dressed for authority, dressed for a record, dressed for a confrontation that he wanted to feel official, even if it wasn't. 2 more men stood behind Calloway, 5 total, including Yates. "Sergeant Macready," Calloway said. "Thank you for coming." "Didn't feel optional, sir." Calloway looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded at Yates. Yates stepped forward. "I'm going to need your sidearm, Sergeant." Cole looked at Yates. Then he looked at Calloway. "On what authority?" "You're under investigation for misappropriation of government property," Calloway said. "Standard protocol during active investigation is to restrict personal weapons access. I'm sure you're familiar. That protocol applies during a formal suspension pending investigation. I haven't been formally suspended. You have been as of this morning." Calloway reached into his breast pocket and produced a folded document. He held it up but didn't hand it over. "Signed by the post commander this morning at 0800. Cole felt something drop in his chest. Not fear, a different sensation, the recognition of how far ahead of him Calloway had been playing. The post commander. That meant Calloway's reach extended further than Cole had mapped. That meant the chain above was compromised, or at least compliant, and the formal route, the clean route, was no longer clean. He unholstered his sidearm slowly, ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and handed it to Yates' grip first. Correct weapons handling. By the book. Because the one thing he was not going to give them was an excuse. "My rifle," Yates said. Cole looked at him. "I don't carry my rifle on base duty." "Your service rifle, from your vehicle." "My personal property, secured in a base facility," Calloway said, "which makes it subject to review during an active investigation. Keys." Cole stood very still. Around him, the 5 men were watching with the patient attention of people who'd been told this might go sideways and were ready for it. He could feel the geometry of it, the spacing, the exits, the way Calloway had positioned himself near the interior door, the way Yates was holding Cole's sidearm with just slightly too much comfort. He handed over his truck keys. Yates left with one of the unnamed soldiers. They came back in 6 minutes. Yates was carrying Cole's Ranger-issued M4, the rifle he'd carried for 12 years, that had been in the Kandahar firefight, that still had the scratch on the lower receiver from the night it hit a rock floor in a forward operating base in the Korengal Valley. Yates put it on the table. Cole looked at it. Then he looked at Calloway. Feel better, Cole said. Calloway's expression didn't change. This is for your protection as much as anything, Sergeant. Investigations are stressful. Men under stress make poor decisions. Is that what happened to Mackey? Cole said. He made a poor decision. Something moved behind Calloway's eyes. Not guilt. Calloway had organized his inner life in such a way that guilt didn't have an address there anymore. But something. Recognition, maybe, that Cole was not operating from fear the way Calloway had expected him to. You're suspended pending investigation, Sergeant. You'll want to cooperate fully. For your son's sake, if nothing else. And that was it. Not the rifle, not the suspension, not the 5 men arranged in a formation designed to make him feel surrounded and small. It was that sentence the third time Tyler had been used as a pressure point. The third deliberate invocation of Cole's son as a lever that moved something in Cole Macready from controlled to decided. He looked at Calloway for a long moment. He was very quiet inside. Not the quiet of defeat, the quiet of a man who has passed through anger and come out the other side into something colder and more functional. I'm going to give you one opportunity, Cole said. His voice was completely level. Turn yourself into CID today. You Draven Yates, whoever else is in this chain. You walk in and you tell the truth and you give back what you took and you account for what you can't give back. One opportunity, right now. Calloway blinked. Then he laughed. It was a short laugh, the kind that doesn't go to the eyes. You're suspended and disarmed, Sergeant. You've got a JAG referral with your name on it, a post commander who's already signed off on your temporary removal, and you're standing in my armory. He tilted his head slightly. What exactly are you offering me an opportunity from? Cole looked at him. Tomorrow, he said simply. Then he turned and walked to the door. Behind him, Calloway said nothing. Yates said nothing. The 5 men let him walk because in the logic of the situation, they had built a disarmed, suspended sergeant walking out of their armory was not a problem. He was a solved problem. Cole walked out into the cold morning air. His truck keys were gone. His weapons were gone. His formal access to base systems would be restricted by end of day. Calloway had the post commander. The JAG referral would generate its own momentum, now pulling attention and institutional response in directions Calloway could manage. Cole walked to the parking lot and stood beside his truck, which he couldn't drive because they had the keys, and felt the full weight of his situation for the first time without filtering it. He was a single father with a teenage son 400 miles away. He was suspended. He was disarmed. He was standing in the middle of a military base where the commanding officer and at least one layer of oversight above him were either corrupt or compliant. He had a field notebook, a manila folder, 12 pages of maintenance logs, and a CID warrant officer who would arrive in approximately 28 hours. 28 hours. He pulled out his phone and called Garrison. They took my weapons, he said. Suspended me. Calloway has the post commander. The clean route is gone. Garrison was quiet for a moment that felt like a full breath. You still have the documentation. In the field box. They took the truck keys, but the box has a separate lock, and I kept the key on my person. He paused. They don't know about Petrov. That's something. It's a lot, actually. Petrov's material on the vehicle components closes the loop on the larger operation. Without that, it's a significant case. With it, it's an airtight case. Cole leaned against his truck. The cold metal against his back was grounding in a specific way. I need to get the documentation out of this box and off base. If they figure out what's in it and find a legal justification to access the vehicle, they'll take it. Can you get to the box without the truck? I have a spare key at home. I need a ride. Call Doss, Garrison said. She's already in. She already understands what's at stake. I can't keep pulling more people into Cole. Garrison's voice was firm. Stop trying to protect everyone alone. That's not strength. That's the same thing that got you standing next to a truck you can't drive with no weapons on a base where the commander is dirty. Let people help you. The cold air sat on his face. He thought about what Tyler had said at the table. You always do. and how much weight a kid puts into believing that about his father, and how much responsibility comes with being the person someone believes that about. "All right," Cole said. He called Doss. She picked up on the second ring and listened without interrupting while he explained what he needed. When he finished, she was quiet for 3 seconds. "I'll be in the south lot in 10 minutes, she said. She was there in 8. They drove to Cole's house, got the spare truck key, drove back. Cole retrieved the field notebook and the compiled documentation from the metal box, transferred it to a plain backpack, and handed it to Doss. "Take this to your personal vehicle. Lock it in your trunk. Don't take it home. Find a storage unit or a trusted friend who doesn't have any connection to the base." "My aunt," Doss said immediately. "She lives in Pueblo. She'd do anything for me, and she doesn't know a soul on this base." "Perfect. Can you get it to her today?" "I have a half-day approved. I'll leave at noon." She looked at the backpack in her hands with the expression of someone understanding fully what they're holding. "If they search my car before I leave, they'd need probable cause or a warrant. They're not there yet. Move fast and you'll be clear." Doss nodded. She looked at him. "Are you okay?" "No," Cole said honestly. "But I'm functional. That's enough for right now." She nodded again. She started her car. Then she stopped and looked back at him through the window. "Mackey's been calling me," she said. "From the barracks. He knows something's happening. He wants to help. Tell him to stay put and stay quiet. He's already done his part." "He won't like that." "No," Cole said. "He won't. Tell him anyway." He watched her drive away, and then stood in the parking lot in the cold, unarmed and suspended, and 27 hours from the only clean play he had left. The base moved around him, vehicles, personnel, the ordinary machinery of a military installation that had no idea what was moving inside it. He thought about Calloway's laugh, the certainty in it, the absolute conviction of a man who had spent too long in a position where no one said no, where authority was armor, where consequences were things that happened to other people. Cole had known men like that. In Iraq and Afghanistan, in every system where power concentrates long enough to start believing in its own permanence. He'd known what happened to them eventually. Not always fast, not always cleanly, but eventually. He went back to his office. He had 27 hours to hold the line. He sat down at his desk and started working. The 27 hours did not go quietly. 27. Cole had been at his desk for 40 minutes when the access notification came through on his terminal, a system-generated alert informing him that his login credentials had been suspended pending administrative review. Standard language. Clinical. The kind of message the Army sends when it wants to do something to you and needs it to look procedural. He read it once, closed the window, and moved to his personal laptop, which was his own property and outside the scope of what they could restrict without a formal order he hadn't seen yet. He spent the next 3 hours writing. Not documentation, he'd done that. What he wrote now was a complete narrative account, time-stamped and specific, of every conversation he'd had with Calloway, Draven, and Yates since Mackey first walked into his office with a folder and a conscience. He wrote it the way his ranger instructors had taught him to write after-action reports, no editorializing, no emotion in the language, just sequence and fact and the precise words people had said. The emotion was there underneath the language, but he kept it out of the text, because emotion in a document gives defense attorneys something to argue about. When he finished, he sent it to Garrison's personal email and Lund's secure contact, then deleted it from his sent folder and his hard drive, using a wipe protocol Garrison had walked him through 2 nights ago. Then he sat back and looked at the wall of his office and breathed. His phone rang at 1 in the afternoon. Doss. "I'm in Pueblo," she said. She was whispering, which meant she was somewhere she didn't want to be overheard. "The documentation is with my aunt. She put it in her gun safe, her actual gun safe with a combination only she knows." A pause. "I didn't tell her what it was. I just told her it was important and I'd explain later, and she said okay, because she's that kind of aunt." "Good," Cole said. You did good, Doss. Something else. Her voice dropped further. When I was driving out, I saw Draven in the parking lot talking to someone I didn't recognize. Civilian clothes, no base sticker on his vehicle. They were looking at something on a phone together. When Draven saw me drive past, he turned away. Cole was very still. What did the civilian look like? Older, 50 maybe? Nice jacket, the kind of nice that doesn't belong in a base parking lot. She paused. I got part of the plate, Colorado, Lima 74, that's all I could get before I was past them. Send it to me in a text, then go back to your aunt's. Stay off base for the rest of today. My leave only covers... Call in sick. Use whatever you have. I'll make it right later. A long pause. Sergeant Macready, is this going to work? Cole thought about that. The honest answer was that he didn't know that Calloway had more institutional leverage than he'd anticipated, that the post commander's involvement had removed the clean line of escalation and made everything more complicated and more dangerous. The honest answer was that in 24 hours, either Patricia Lund would walk onto this base with the authority to open a formal investigation, or Calloway would have used those same 24 hours to close off enough avenues that the whole thing became a question of who the Army decided to believe. Yes, Cole said, it's going to work. He wasn't sure that was true, but he said it the way he'd told Tyler he'd tell him if it was bad. Not as a lie exactly, but as a declaration of intent. A thing you say, because saying it shapes the direction you move. Okay, Doss said quietly. Okay. She hung up. Cole texted Garrison the partial plate. Garrison called back in 11 minutes. Vehicle is registered to a holding company in Denver, Garrison said. LLC incorporated 14 months ago. You want to guess who shows up in the Articles of Incorporation as a registered agent? Tell me. A law firm that also represents 3 military contracting companies with active bids at Fort Carson. A pause waited with implication. This isn't just Calloway skimming weapons for side income, Cole. The civilian in that parking lot is the buyer, or the buyer's representative. Someone is brokering these weapons and components to a contractor who is either reselling them or using them to fill government contracts on the cheap while billing full price. Cole felt the scale of it settle over him like a physical weight. This was not a lieutenant colonel running a theft ring for personal enrichment. This was procurement fraud connected to active government contracts. This was the kind of thing that had a decade in federal prison attached to it for everyone involved, which meant everyone involved had every reason in the world to make sure it never came to light. How many people above Calloway know? Cole asked. I don't know. The post commander signed off on your suspension this morning, which means either he's involved or Calloway has enough on him that he doesn't ask questions. Garrison's voice was measured. Lund needs to know the scope before she walks onto that base tomorrow. If she goes in thinking it's a straightforward theft case, and it's actually federal procurement fraud with civilian contractors, she'll walk into it unprepared. Cole was already standing, already moving toward the window. I need to call her. Do it now, and Cole, be careful about using your cell. If Calloway's operation is as organized as it's looking, they may have access to call logs. Cole thought about the 2-word text from the unknown number the night before. Smart man. Not a threat. A signal. Someone on the inside had been watching him and had felt compelled to tell him so. He hadn't figured out who yet. He wasn't sure it mattered. What mattered was that if someone was watching, they had access to his communications. I'll use Garrison's line, Cole said. Call her for me. 3-way if you can. I need to tell her directly. Garrison set it up. Lund came on the line, and Cole talked for 8 minutes straight without stopping the civilian vehicle. The LLC, the law firm, the contracting connection, the post commander's complicity, the full scope of what he and Garrison had assembled. Lund listened without interrupting once, which was its own kind of statement about the discipline of the woman. When he finished, she was silent for 4 seconds. I need to make a call, she said. When I come tomorrow, I'm not coming alone. How many? Enough. A pause. Sergeant Macready, I need you to stay on that base. I need you visible. I need you compliant with your suspension. and I need you to not do anything that gives Calloway grounds to have you removed from the installation before I arrive. Can you do that?" "Yes," Cole said. "I mean it. Nothing physical. Nothing confrontational. Nothing that looks like anything other than a suspended soldier following proper protocol. I understand. One more thing." Her voice shifted slightly. "I pulled Calloway's file this afternoon. You said something in our first conversation that the investigation required someone who'd been inside the system long enough to know where it breathed. You were right. Calloway has been at Fort Carson for 6 years. That's an unusually long tenure for his rank, and it's been extended twice on administrative grounds that are vague enough to make me curious." She paused. "Someone wanted him exactly where he was for exactly this long. This is bigger than one base." Yeah. Cole stood at his office window and looked out at the base at the flagpole and the parade ground and the buildings he'd moved through every day for 2 years, the ordinary geography of a place that had just revealed itself to be something other than what it appeared and felt, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not even anger. Something more like clarity, the cold, specific clarity that comes when a situation strips away its last layer of ambiguity and shows you exactly what it is. "I'll be here," Cole said. "Tomorrow." He spent the remainder of the afternoon compliant and visible exactly as instructed. He sat at his desk with no system access and read a physical copy of a logistics manual he'd already memorized because being seen reading a logistics manual during a suspension was the single most innocent-looking thing a logistics sergeant could do. He ate dinner in the mess at 17:30. He said hello to 3 people he knew. He checked his phone in full view of 2 soldiers he suspected reported to Draven, because checking his phone openly was different from doing it privately, and the difference mattered. At 1900, he went back to the house. The first thing he noticed was the porch light. He'd left it on the way. He always left it on when Tyler wasn't home. An old habit from when Tyler was small. The irrational domestic comfort of a lit porch against an empty house. It was off. He'd turned it on this morning before he left. He was certain of it. Then Cole stopped on the front walk. He stood very still and looked at the house at the windows, the shadows, the geometry of a space he'd lived in for 2 years. He breathed slowly and let his training work the part of him that had spent 12 years reading environments for wrong notes. The porch light was wrong. The window on the left side was wrong, not open, but the blinds were at an angle he hadn't left them. He pulled out his phone and called Garrison. "Someone's been in my house." "You inside?" "No, front walk. Back away from the front. Circle to the neighbor's property. Don't go in alone." "I'm not going in at all." Cole moved back to the sidewalk, kept moving. "I don't carry right now, Garrison. They took everything." "Are you certain someone's been there?" "Porch lights off. Blinds on the left window are moved. This is what a toss looks like from the outside." "They're looking for the documentation." "Yes." Cole was already thinking past it. "They won't find it. It's in Pueblo. But they'll know I'm not going to find it either. They'll know I know they were there, which means—" He stopped. The thought completed itself all at once, the way tactical realization always arrives, not gradually, but in a single unlocking. They don't need the documentation. They're going to move tonight, before Lund arrives. Whatever they're planning to do to close this out, they're doing it tonight. "Cole, where's Mackie?" "What?" "Mackie. He's still in the barracks. If they decide the documentation is gone, and the case can be managed by eliminating witnesses, go." Garrison's voice was sharp. "Go right now." Cole was already moving. He covered the distance to the barracks on foot 400 yards fast. Not running attracts attention, and he was suspended and visible and needed to remain exactly that, but walking at the pace of a man who has somewhere to be and intends to be there. He got to the barracks building and took the stairs to the 2nd floor and knocked on Mackie's door. Silence. He knocked again. "Mackie, it's Macready. Open the door." A long pause. Then the sound of movement, careful and slow. The door opened 2 inches. One swollen eye looked through the gap. Then the door swung fully open. Mackie looked worse than the last time Cole had seen him, which had been 3 days ago, when he'd looked like he'd been used as a demonstration in a close-quarters combat class. The bruising had gone through its full color progression, yellow-green at the edges, still deep purple at the center. He was moving carefully, the particular economy of motion that cracked ribs in force. "What's happening?" Mackie said. His voice was alert. He'd heard something in Cole's knock. "Get dressed. Bring your ID, your phone, anything you need. You're not sleeping here tonight." Mackie didn't argue. He turned and started moving, and Cole liked him for that, for the absence of questions in a moment that required action. He was dressed in under 2 minutes, his field bag over one shoulder. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Off base. I know someone in town who'll put us both up." Cole had already thought of it. Master Sergeant Warren Fitch, retired, who'd served with Cole at Bagram and now ran a hardware store in Colorado Springs and had a house with a spare room, and the particular loyalty of a man who'd never once asked Cole for a thing and had made it clear he never would. They were in the stairwell when Mackie stopped. "Sergeant Macready." His voice was quiet. He looked at Cole with the one eye that opened fully. "When I brought you that folder, I knew it was going to go bad. I knew it. He stopped. "My dad used to say you can know something's going to cost you and do it anyway. He said that's what makes the difference between a man and someone who's just taking up space." Cole looked at the young soldier, at the damage on his face, at the bedrock stubbornness that had survived it intact. "Your dad was right," he said. "Yes, sir." Mackie adjusted his bag. "I'm ready." They went down the stairs and out the side door, and Cole called Warren Fitch from the parking lot. Fitch picked up on the first ring, listened for 30 seconds and said, "Front door's unlocked," with no additional commentary, which was exactly the kind of man Warren Fitch was. They were crossing toward the main gate when Draven appeared, not walking toward them, positioned, standing at the edge of the parking lot near the gatehouse, hands in his jacket pockets with the stillness of someone who'd been waiting for something specific. He saw them and didn't move. He just looked. Cole walked toward him. Not a detour directly closing the distance deliberately, because the only thing more dangerous than walking toward Draven right now was letting Draven choose the terms of engagement. He stopped 6 feet away. "Walking the private off-base, Sergeant," Draven said. "That's interesting." "We're both free to use the front gate," Cole said. "Unless you have a legal basis to restrict movement, which you don't." Draven looked at Mackie. The look lasted just long enough to communicate that it was intentional. Mackie didn't flinch, which Cole noted and respected. "We've been looking for those archive documents," Draven said conversationally. "Seems they've gone missing." "That's unfortunate," Cole said. "You wouldn't know anything about that." "No." Draven looked at him. The calculation behind his eyes was running fast. Cole could see it, the assessment of options. The consideration of whether a physical escalation in the parking lot near the gatehouse served his interests right now. It didn't. Too visible. Too close to an exit that witnesses passed through constantly. Whatever Calloway had planned, this wasn't the moment for it. "Enjoy your evening," Draven said. "You too," Cole said. He and Mackie walked through the gate. Cole didn't look back. He'd learned a long time ago that looking back signals doubt, and doubt signals to a man like Draven that the thing you're doing might be interrupted. He walked straight and even all the way to the street, and Mackie walked beside him and didn't speak, and they didn't speak until they were 2 blocks clear of the gate. "He's going to tell Calloway," Mackie said. "Yes." "So they know we're off base?" "Yes." "Is that bad?" Cole thought about it. "It means they can't touch us tonight without moving outside the base, which is messier for them. It means Calloway has to decide whether to wait for tomorrow and deal with Lund, or do something tonight that creates exposure he can't manage." He paused. "If I were Calloway, I'd wait. He still thinks his position is stronger than it is." Is it? No, Cole said. But he doesn't know what we have yet. Mackie was quiet for half a block. What do we have? Cole looked at him sideways, considered how much to say, then decided that Mackie had earned the truth, had paid for it actually, in a currency that left marks. Everything. Vehicle components with traceable serial numbers. 14 months of outgoing transfers with receiving confirmations that don't exist. A civilian contractor connection that turns this from a base theft into federal procurement fraud. He paused. A CID warrant officer arriving tomorrow with backup. Mackie absorbed this. So it's over. Almost. What does almost mean? Cole thought about Calloway, about the man's absolute confidence in his own permanence, about 6 years and 1 posting tenure extensions on administrative grounds vague enough to be suspicious, a post commander who signed suspension orders without asking questions. About the way Calloway had stood at that window with his hands behind his back like a man who'd won before the game started. It means tomorrow, Cole said. It all comes down to tomorrow. Fitch's house was 20 minutes away. Warren Fitch met them at the door with coffee and sandwiches and the specific wordless competence of a retired master sergeant who had seen enough situations to know when a situation required questions and when it required sandwiches. He showed Mackie to the spare room, told him the bathroom was across the hall, and left him to it. In the kitchen, Fitch poured Cole a second coffee and sat across from him at the table with the ease of a man on his own ground. How bad? He asked. It was bad, Cole said. It's getting better. Your boy safe? In Tucson with Garrison. Fitch nodded slowly. You know I've known you 12 years, Cole. Fallujah, Bagram, 2 stateside assignments. He wrapped both hands around his mug. I've seen you in some bad situations. You've never looked quite like this before. Cole looked at him. Like what? Fitch considered it. Like a man who's about to win something he didn't know he was fighting for. Cole sat with that for a moment. Outside, the Colorado night pressed against the kitchen windows. Somewhere across town, Raymond Calloway was doing whatever men do in the hours before the thing they've built starts coming apart, reviewing his options, shoring up his positions, running the same calculation Cole had been running from the other side. Seeing where the gaps were, looking for the exits. Cole's phone buzzed on the table. A text from an unknown number different from the 2-word text 2 nights ago, but the same pattern. Anonymous brief. This time it was 4 words. He's meeting Petrov tonight. Cole stared at the screen. Whoever the inside source was, whoever had sent Smartman, and was now sending this, they were close enough to Calloway's inner circle to know his movements in real time. And right now they were telling Cole that Calloway had found out about Petrov. That the last witness Cole had kept hidden was no longer hidden. He was already standing. Fitch, he said. I need your truck. Fitch stood up without asking why. He pulled his keys off the hook by the door and held them out. You need company. Cole thought about it for exactly 1 second. Yeah, he said. I do. Fitch drove and Cole navigated from the passenger seat, phone in hand, Garrison on speaker. Petrov's brother's house, Cole said. That's where the documentation is. That's where Calloway's people are headed. How'd they find out about Petrov? Garrison asked. Someone talked, or someone listened. It doesn't matter right now. Cole watched the streets move past the window. What matters is, we get there first. You're unarmed, Cole. I know. You're suspended. Anything physical tonight becomes a liability for the case tomorrow. I know that too. Cole stared at the road ahead. I'm not going there to fight anyone. I'm going there to make sure Petrov doesn't open his door to the wrong people alone. Garrison was quiet for a moment. I'm calling Lund. Do it. Fitch drove without speaking, which was the right thing to do. He was that kind of man, the kind who understood that in certain moments, the most useful thing you can offer someone is the absence of noise. He drove the way he'd done everything Cole had ever seen him do, steady, deliberate, no wasted motion. They were 15 minutes out when Cole's phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. One word this time. Hurry. He showed it to Fitch without comment. Fitch pressed the accelerator. Petrov's brother lived in a quiet residential neighborhood east of Colorado Springs, a narrow street with single-story houses and cars parked tight along both curbs. Fitch cut the headlights a block out and rolled the last 100 yards on momentum and brake. Cole was watching the street before they stopped moving, and what he saw tightened everything in his chest at once. A dark SUV was parked in front of the house. Engine off, no plates visible from this angle. A single figure stood on the front porch, hand raised, knocking. Not aggressive, patient, the knock of someone who expects the door to open because they've decided it will. Cole recognized the build before he recognized the face. Yates. "Stay here," Cole told Fitch. "Like hell," Fitch said and got out of the truck. Cole didn't argue. They moved fast and quiet along the sidewalk, using the parked cars for cover, the way two men move when their bodies remember training that their civilian lives have tried to smooth over. Cole got to the front walk as Yates knocked a second time. He didn't slow down. "Marcus," Cole said. Yates spun. His hand moved toward his hip and then stopped. Stopped because Cole was close enough that the geometry was wrong for what he was reaching for, close enough that the reach would take longer than the gap. It was a calculation Yates completed in less than a second and arrived at the correct answer. "Macready." His voice was flat. "You need to go back wherever you came from." "I live in a country where I can stand on a public sidewalk," Cole said. "So do you. So does everyone." He glanced at the door, which had not opened. "Private Petrov isn't home." "I'm not here for Petrov." "Then why are you here?" Yates said nothing. He looked at Cole, then at Fitch, then back at Cole. The calculation was running again. Two men, no visible weapons, but two men who moved like they'd been in worse situations than this, and had not been in them alone. The SUV was behind him. Cole made a point of looking at it. "Whoever's in that vehicle," Cole said, "they should know that a CID warrant officer arrives at Fort Carson tomorrow morning, with documentation and colleagues." He kept his voice even, the way you keep your voice when you want the words to land clean, without the interference of emotion. "Whatever Calloway told you this operation looked like, it doesn't look like that anymore. It's federal procurement fraud, 10 years minimum. And the people who walk in voluntarily before 8 tomorrow morning get to have a conversation with prosecutors about cooperation. The people who don't—" He paused. "Don't." The front door of the house opened. Petrov's brother stood in the doorway, a larger version of Petrov, same careful posture, a dish towel in one hand, and the expression of a man who had come to the door because someone he loved was calling from the sidewalk. He looked at Cole. He looked at Yates. He looked at the SUV. "Is there a problem?" he said quietly. "No," Cole said. "These men were just leaving." "Bought." Yates stood very still for another 3 seconds. Cole watched him work through it. The options, the exposure, the math of a man realizing that the ground under his position has shifted without him noticing. Then Yates stepped back. He walked to the SUV, got in the passenger side, and the vehicle pulled away from the curb without rushing, the deliberate unhurriedness of a retreat that wants to look like a choice. Cole exhaled. Fitch put a hand on his shoulder briefly, then dropped it. "Nice," he said quietly. Cole turned to Petrov's brother. "I need to speak with your brother. Tonight. It's important." "He's inside." The man stepped back from the door. "He's been waiting by the phone for 2 hours." Petrov was at the kitchen table when they came in, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. When he saw Cole, he stood up fast, the relief in his face so complete it was almost painful to look at. "I got a call," Petrov said. "Someone on base I don't know who telling me that Calloway knew my name. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call you. I was afraid my calls were being monitored." "They might be," Cole said. "It doesn't matter now. Is the documentation still in the safe?" Petrov's brother nodded. "Nobody's touched it." Good. I need you to do one more thing. Cole sat down across from Petrov. Tomorrow morning early, I'm going to give you a name and a number. You're going to call that person and tell them where the documentation is and that you're prepared to make a sworn statement. Can you do that? Petrov looked at him steadily. Yes. Whatever happens between now and tomorrow morning, you don't open that door for anyone except me or your brother. Understood. Understood. Cole stood. He looked at the younger man at the months of quiet, solitary documentation. The 4 months of carrying something too heavy to carry alone in a job where speaking up meant risking everything. He thought about Mackie, about Doss, about the particular kind of courage that doesn't look like courage because it's too quiet and too specific to be cinematic, just a man logging serial numbers in a notebook because his conscience gave him no other option. You did a good thing, Cole said. You held it together when it would have been easier not to. Petrov nodded once. His jaw was tight. Will it count? Everything I documented, will it actually count? Yes, Cole said. Every word of it. He meant it. And for the first time in 4 days he said something like that without wondering if it was true. He called Lund from Fitch's truck on the drive back. She answered on the first ring, which meant she'd been awake. Yates went to the brother's house, Cole said. I was there. He left without incident. The documentation is secure. You were there. Her voice carried the specific flatness of a person exercising enormous restraint. I told you nothing physical. Nothing physical happened. Because you were there. Yes. A long pause. Are you hurt? No. Is anyone hurt? No. Then we'll have a conversation about this tomorrow after I've done my job. She paused. The documentation is secure. Petrov is secure. You are secure. Go to sleep, Sergeant Macready. You need to be functional tomorrow, and right now you are running on coffee and adrenaline and 12 years of stubbornness. Yes, ma'am, Cole said. Then, how many are you bringing? Enough, she said. Like I told you. She hung up. Fitch drove them back to his house. Mackie was asleep in the spare room, which was probably the best thing his body had done for itself since the beating. Cole sat in Fitch's kitchen for a while, and then went to the couch and closed his eyes, and this time, unlike the night before, sleep came fast. He dreamed about Tyler at about 9 years old, the summer they'd spent 3 weeks in Wyoming with Cole's father before the old man got sick. Tyler learning to fish, the specific concentration on his face, the way he'd held the rod, the way Cole showed him, and then immediately adjusted it to something that felt right to him personally, because that was Tyler always absorbing instruction and then quietly making it his own. Cole had stood in the river watching his son and felt something so complete it had no name. The feeling of a life working the way a life is supposed to. He woke at 5:30. He lay still for 30 seconds, listened to the house. Then he got up and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and waited for the morning to arrive. Lund pulled through the Fort Carson main gate at 8:47 with 3 vehicles and 6 agents, 2 of whom were FBI. Cole found out about it from Garrison, who found out from Lund's call to him at 8:15 when she cleared the Colorado Springs city limits. Cole was sitting in Fitch's truck in the visitor parking lot outside the base main entrance, and when he got the call, he drove to the gate and showed his military ID and was waved through because, suspended or not, he was still a staff sergeant with an active credential, and nobody at the gatehouse had been told otherwise. He met Lund outside the administrative building at 9:05. She was smaller than he'd expected from her voice, compact and precise, with the posture of someone who'd spent years in rooms where being underestimated was an occupational advantage she'd learned to use. She wore civilian clothes. She held a badge wallet in one hand and a briefcase in the other, and looked at Cole with the expression of a woman who'd reviewed his file in enough detail to have opinions. "Sergeant Macready," she said. "Warrant Officer Lund. Walk with me." She moved toward the building, and Cole fell into step beside her. "We executed a records hold at 0800 on all relevant base administrative systems. IT is copying the full archive now, and the originals are under agency control. Nobody on this base touches those records from this point on. She walked fast. I need the physical documentation. I can have it here in 2 hours. Do it. She paused at the building entrance and looked at him directly for the first time. She had the eyes of someone who processed information very quickly and filed it very precisely. I also need Dos Petrov and Mackey. Separate rooms, separate interviews, starting at 10. I can reach all three. I know you can. That's why I'm telling you to do it. She pushed open the door. And Sergeant, your suspension is formally under review pending the outcome of this investigation. As of this morning, you are operating in a cooperating witness capacity. That means you follow my instructions, not your instincts. Are we clear? Clear, Cole said. Good. She went through the door, then she stopped and looked back at him one more time. Garrison said you were the most stubborn man he'd ever served with. The corner of her mouth moved in a way that wasn't quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. He meant it as a compliment. I know, Cole said. He told me. She went inside. Cole pulled out his phone and started making calls. Dos drove from Pueblo with the documentation and arrived at 10:20. Petrov came in from his brother's house and was in an interview room by 10:45. Mackey walked onto the base with Cole at 11 and went directly to where Lund's team was set up, and when he sat down across from the investigator and told her everything. The inventory discrepancy, the first conversation with Cole, the beating, all of it, he told it in the steady, unflinching way of a man who had been waiting for exactly this room and exactly this moment. Yet Cole sat in a hallway and waited. Calloway was brought in at 11:30. Cole didn't see it happen. He was still in the hallway, but Garrison called him from Tucson, having heard it through Lund's contact, and described it the way you describe something you can't see, but can hear from the next room. Calloway had been in his office. He'd been brought out by 2 agents and 1 MP with his ribbon still on and his posture still correct. And he'd walked the length of the administrative building without speaking, and people had stood in their doorways and watched, and nobody had said a word. Draven was picked up at the south end of the base 20 minutes later, near the maintenance yard, which suggested he'd been in the middle of something when the morning arrived. Yates turned himself in voluntarily at 12:15, which answered the question Cole had been quietly asking since the night before: who among Calloway's people understood which way this was going and had the clarity of mind to act on it? The answer was the one who'd watched Cole stand on a sidewalk with no weapons, and a CID warrant officer arriving in the morning and had done the math correctly. Cole was called into the interview room at 1 in the afternoon. He sat across from Lund and one of the FBI agents, a quiet man named Carruthers, who took notes with a mechanical pencil and asked 2 questions during the entire hour and laid out everything he knew in the order he knew it. He spoke for 48 minutes straight. When he was done, Lund looked at her notes and then looked at him. You ran a parallel investigation for 11 days, while under institutional pressure with no formal authority, while protecting 3 witnesses and a minor. And you managed not to get anyone hurt or break any laws. She paused. That is genuinely impressive, Sergeant. I had help, Cole said. Yes, from a retired gunnery sergeant in Tucson, a 26-year-old specialist, a maintenance technician, and a hardware store owner. She set down her pen. The Army is fortunate that you were the one who found this. Cole thought about that. I didn't find it, he said. Mackey found it. I just made sure it went somewhere. Lund looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded slowly, the nod of someone updating a file. There's one more thing. She picked up a sheet from the folder in front of her. Your suspension is lifted as of 1400 today. Your weapons will be returned. Your system access will be restored. A pause. The referral Calloway filed against you is being formally withdrawn and flagged as retaliatory. It won't follow you. Cole sat with that. He'd been carrying the weight of it for 4 days. The referral, the suspension, the particular grinding anxiety of having your name attached to something false that has momentum, and the release of it was quieter than he'd expected. Not triumphant, just lighter. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," Lund said. "You built the case. I just confirmed it." He walked out of the building at 2 in the afternoon into a Colorado afternoon that was cold and bright, the kind of day that feels like it's been cleaned by something. He stood on the steps and took a breath that went all the way to the bottom of his lungs. Then he called Garrison. "It's done," he said. Garrison was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had the warmth in it that it reserved for very specific occasions. "Yeah, Calloway's in custody. Draven and Yates both. Suspension lifted. Documentation is in federal hands." Cole sat down on the steps. "It's done, Garrison." "I'll tell Tyler." "No." Cole almost smiled. "Let me do that." He called Tyler from the steps of the administrative building while agents and investigators moved in and out around him. The phone rang twice. "Dad." Tyler's voice immediate and alert. "What happened?" "It's over," Cole said. "Everything's okay. You can come home." A silence, long enough that Cole almost said something to fill it. Then Tyler's voice came back, and there was something in it Cole hadn't heard in a while. The unguarded version of his son, the one that didn't have the 17-year-old armor over it. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, buddy, I'm sure." Another pause. "Were you scared?" Cole thought about it. Really thought about it the way you owe a direct question a direct answer. "A few times. Yeah." "But you kept going." "Yeah." He heard Tyler exhale a long, slow release of something that had been held for 4 days, the particular sound of a kid breathing out fear that he'd been too proud to name while he was carrying it. "Okay," Tyler said quietly. "Okay, good." A beat. "Garrison's got this terrible instant coffee. I've been suffering." Cole laughed. It came out of nowhere, and it was real. The kind of laugh that happens when the pressure drops all at once. "I'll make you the good stuff when you get home. The Colombian kind." "Whatever kind you want." "I want the Colombian kind." "Then that's what you'll get." Cole pressed his hand flat against his knee. "I love you, Ty." "I know," Tyler said. Then quietly, "I love you too, Dad." Then the call ended. Cole sat on the steps with the phone in his hand and let the afternoon sit around him for a moment. Just a moment. Just long enough to feel the full weight of what the last 4 days had been, and what they'd cost, and what they'd come to. Then Mackie came out the front door and sat down beside him. He looked better than he had in days. Not healed, the face was still a map of damage, but something in his bearing had shifted. The coiled tension of a man waiting for the second blow had gone out of him. He sat the way people sit when they're not bracing for anything. "She said my statement was the cornerstone," Mackie said. "Warrant Officer Lund. She said without the initial inventory documentation I brought you, there was no case to build." "That's true," Cole said. "Bye." Mackie was quiet for a moment. "I almost didn't come to your office that day. I stood outside for maybe 5 minutes just standing there thinking about all the reasons I shouldn't knock." He paused. "I almost talked myself out of it." "But you didn't." "No." He looked out at the base. "You told me the day after the beating, you told me I'd done the right thing. I wasn't sure I believed you then." He paused again. "I believe it now." Cole looked at the young soldier beside him. At the damage that would fade, and the thing underneath the damage that wouldn't, the stubbornness, the honesty, the fundamental refusal to look away from something wrong, even when looking away would have cost him nothing. He thought about what Tyler had said at the breakfast table. "Before all of this started, you seemed decided." He thought about the moment in Calloway's office, when he'd looked at the man across the desk and understood that the distance between who Calloway was and who Cole was couldn't be bridged by fear or leverage or the invocation of a son's name. "What are you going to do now?" Cole asked. Mackie thought about it. "Stay in," he said. I know that might sound crazy given—" He gestured at his face with a kind of dry humor that Cole liked him for all of this. "But I joined because I believed it meant something. I still believe that." He paused. "Maybe more than I did before." "It's not crazy," Cole said. They sat for a moment in the comfortable silence that exists between people who've been through something together and don't need to fill the air with evidence of it. "Thank you, Sergeant Macready," Mackey said finally. Cole looked at him. "You did the hard part first," he said. "Don't forget that." The court proceedings took 8 months. Cole was called as a primary witness 4 times. Petrov's serial number documentation proved to be the evidentiary foundation that connected the base thefts to the civilian contractor network, a procurement fraud operation that had been running for 3 years across 2 bases, funneling military equipment to a middleman who resold it to 2 private contracting firms that were billing the federal government for brand new components while installing stolen ones. The financial exposure ran to $11 million. Callaway was convicted on 14 counts, including conspiracy procurement fraud and obstruction. He was sentenced to 12 years. The ribbons didn't help him. The 20 years of service didn't help him. The post commander who'd signed Cole's suspension order pled guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for testimony and was dishonorably discharged. Draven received 7 years. Yates, who had cooperated fully and early, received 3 years probation and a dishonorable discharge.
Bamdish.
The inside source. The unknown number, who had sent Smart Man and Hurry, turned out to be Callaway's own adjutant, a staff sergeant named Holloway, who had been feeding him information for months, and had quietly decided the night Cole sat in Callaway's office and refused to be moved that he was backing the wrong side. He came forward voluntarily during the investigation and was granted immunity. He was the kind of man who made the wrong choices for a long time and then made the right one when it finally mattered, and Cole had thought about him more than once in the months that followed the particular mercy available to people who find their conscience before it's too late. Doss was promoted to Staff Sergeant 18 months after the investigation closed. She and Mackey were still in touch, Cole knew, because Mackey mentioned her the way people mention someone when they want you to know without saying it directly. He was glad for that. They'd both earned something good. Petrov received a formal commendation and a transfer to a base in Georgia, where his documentation skills were apparently considered an asset rather than an inconvenience. He sent Cole a text message on the day the verdict came down that said only it counted, and Cole kept that text for reasons he didn't entirely explain to himself. Garrison drove up from Tucson 2 weekends after the sentencing. He and Fitch and Cole sat on Cole's back porch on a Saturday afternoon with beer, and the particular ease of men who'd known each other long enough that silence is as comfortable as conversation. Tyler moved in and out of the porch, and at one point sat down and listened, while Garrison told a story about Fallujah that Cole had heard 4 times and still laughed at, and the sound of Tyler laughing at the same parts Cole laughed at went into some deep ledger inside Cole's chest and stayed there. Later, after Garrison had gone back inside, and Fitch had started talking about whether the Broncos had any shot this season, Tyler came and stood beside Cole at the porch railing. He looked out at the backyard with the particular quiet that had been on him since he came home from Tucson. Not a troubled quiet, a thoughtful one, the quiet of someone who has been turning something over and finally has it the right way. "I've been thinking," Tyler said. "About what?" "About what you did." He paused. "Not the investigation part, I mean that too. But mostly I've been thinking about the part where they suspended you and took your weapons and your access and your keys, and you still just kept going." He looked at his father. Where does that come from? Cole thought about his father. About the kitchen and the dish towel, and slow down, son, slow down and think. About Kandahar and the 47 men and the 23 seconds that had cost him his shoulder and his easy sleep for the rest of his life. And he would make the same decision again tomorrow without blinking. About a 22-year-old private standing outside his office door for 5 minutes, working up the nerve to knock and choosing to knock anyway. "I don't know exactly," Cole said honestly. "I think some of it is training, some of it is stubbornness, Some of it is just knowing what you believe and not being willing to let someone else decide for you that it doesn't matter. He paused. And some of it is you. Tyler looked at him. Me. Yep. You're at an age where you're watching how people handle things. I've known that for a long time. I've known it since you were 9 years old, and I caught you watching me fix the truck, and I realized you were going to remember how I did it. Cole looked at his son directly. I wasn't going to let you watch me walk away from something wrong, because the wrong people made it expensive to stand up. I wasn't going to be that story. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. The backyard was still. The afternoon light was going gold the way it does in Colorado before it goes. You weren't, Tyler said quietly. No, Cole said. I wasn't. And they stood at the railing together in the fading light, father and son. The specific gravity of it, 4 days of fear, resolved into this one ordinary October evening on a back porch in Colorado Springs. Inside the house, Garrison and Fitch were arguing cheerfully about something, their voices low and comfortable through the glass door. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking. The world was doing what the world does when you've stopped holding your breath. Cole thought about a rifle on a table, the sound it made like a judge's gavel. The look in Calloway's eyes, certain absolute, the look of a man who had confused rank with righteousness for so long that he'd stopped knowing the difference. He thought about what it felt like to be stripped of everything, weapons access keys, the formal apparatus of authority, and to find out what was left when all of that was gone, to find out whether what was left was enough. It was. It had always been. Because Raymond Calloway had looked at Cole Macready and seen a suspended sergeant with a bad shoulder and a teenager to protect and a career on the line, and he had made the oldest miscalculation available to men who believe that power is the same as strength. He'd thought that taking what a man carries made the man less. He'd thought that stripping the rifle stripped the soldier. He was wrong, and he paid for being wrong with everything he had. Cole Macready had walked into that armory empty-handed and walked out of the other side of 8 months with his record clean, his son watching his rifle back on his shoulder, and $11 million of federal fraud in the hands of people who would do something with it that Calloway never intended. Some men are made by the things given to them. Some men are made by the things taken away. Cole Macready had always known which kind he was, and on the day they took his rifle, he proved it to everyone who'd been watching and hadn't known yet. He was the kind they couldn't take anything from that mattered. He was the kind that didn't quit. And in the end, that was the only kind that won.